Live from SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, welcome to this week's last edition of The Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and on the show this evening,
we remain concerned with the high rates of HIV infections among young people, especially adolescent girls and young women.
A disturbing HIV infection rate that casts a shadow over the country's fight against the epidemic. Something has to be done, and pretty quickly. We speak to the Health Department's head of HIV prevention strategies, as well as the head of advocacy group, the Treatment Action Campaign. A new report shows that despite a long history of mining regulation and endless promises to rectify the situation, the extremely high number of abandoned and derelict mines is leaving many more communities destitute, and the situation is only getting worse. Deputy President David Mabuza has painted a rather gloomy picture of the country's HIV infection rate among young people, in particular young women. Responding to questions yesterday in Parliament, Mabuza revealed startling numbers when comparing the rate of infection between young men and women.
To date, South Africa has the largest antiretroviral treatment in the whole world. That has resulted in a significant increase in the people who are living long. As at August 2022, 90% of the estimated number of people living with HIV, they know their status. And 76% of those people who know their status are on treatment. And 90% of those people who are on treatment have suppressed their viral loads. That means they can live long. Despite the progress we have attained to date, however, Honourable Speaker, we remain concerned with the high rates of HIV infections among young people, especially adolescent girls and young women. These new HIV infections occur in young people between the age of 15 and 24. And according to the Tembisa 4.3 model, in 2019, there were roughly 14,000 new infections in young males and 55,000 infections in young women.
Deputy President David Mabuza speaking in Parliament yesterday during a question and answer session. Well, I'm now joined by the National Health Department's Director of Prevention Studies, and that's Dr. Tato Chidarikire. Also part of this conversation is Sibongile Shabalala, who is the chairperson of the advocacy group, the Treatment Action Campaign, an organization that for many years now has been campaigning, raising public awareness and understanding about issues around the availability, affordability, and use of HIV treatments. Good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for your time.
Good evening, and
good evening.
Thank you for inviting us.
Really appreciate it. Doc, I mean, we've been having a good story to tell. I mean, deaths declining over the years, many people, accessing antiretroviral treatment, extending the lifespans of so many people in our country, and now this, albeit a small increase, it has to concern us.
Yes, the increase in new infections, especially in the population 15 to 24, is of great concern. What I would maybe just say is that, yes, the Deputy President spoke about the stats for 2019, But maybe it would also be prudent to actually mention the stats for 2020, which was a slight reduction of about now from 14,000 to 11,000 for males, and then from 49 to 44 for females. And then 2021, another decline of 10,000 in males and about 42,000 in females. The decline is not as steep as we want it to be, but it is a decline nonetheless. However, it is really, really important that the country, our civil society, and the population at large actually comes together and play this crucial part in terms of trying to reduce infections, in particular for the young people, 15 to 24, but the population in general. Because even as we are, even with the decline that we're seeing, we still have young people bearing the brunt of HIV infection, in particular the young women.
Ms. Shawala, just your thoughts around these numbers?
As Treatment Action Campaign, we are not surprised by numbers because I think it's been time and it's been long that we talked an infection rate on people, especially 54. And the country also, we're trying to engage these issues. And it's not a surprise for us that are facing these challenges now, but we need to do more of young people and all.
Shawala, I'm going to ask that we perhaps try and see if we can get a better connection. So in the meantime, I'm going to continue speaking to the health department so that we can try and see if we can't really fix that line there. Dr. Chidarekire, if I may just ask, I mean, yes, you do point out that, I mean, in 2020 and of course, also in 2021, we're seeing this decline, albeit it wasn't as steep as we would have wanted it. Do we know what the cause of this, or what are the contributing factors to what we are seeing now?
So I don't want to put the full blame on COVID-19, but we cannot withstand the fact that COVID-19 did actually reverse the gains that we had made in the progress against HIV and AIDS. However, if we're talking about this young population, the 15 to 24, especially the young women, there are a lot of factors that contribute towards the continuing infection rates. And those are usually not just biomedical in terms of access and availability, but also structural factors, as well as the social and behavior. So we look at issues that we usually go on when we go on like behavioral surveys. We'll find that on an annual basis, year in, year out, we find that the young people actually, in terms of sexual debut, it's increasing. More and more younger and younger people are actually going through earlier sexual debut. There is a decline.
Okay, we seem to be having some serious problems with our lines. I'm going to see if we can take a quick ad break and try and re-establish both lines to our guests. I mean, technology really messing us up this evening. Let's take a quick ad break. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back, and if you've just joined us, Deputy President David Mabuza yesterday painted a rather gloomy picture of the country's HIV infection rates among young people, in particular women. And for this conversation, I am joined by the National Health Department's Director of Prevention Studies, and that's Dr. Tato Chidarikire. Also part of this conversation is Sibongile Shabalala, who continues to have a problem with her line. We're trying to sort that out as best as we can. She's the chairperson of advocacy group, the Treatment Action Campaign. Dr. Chidarikire, I mean, I don't know. We are having these problems. I'm hoping that the line is going to hold this time around. We were talking before that line gave us problems about what could be the contributing factors to what we are seeing.
Right. So as I was saying, notwithstanding the challenges that COVID-19 actually posed or imposed on us in the past 2 years, by reversing a lot of the gains that we had actually had with regards to the fight against HIV and AIDS in many ways, and the health sector in general. We look at the young people, which is the population that we're talking to, where we're seeing a lot of increase in new infections. And some of these challenges or some of the contributing factors are due to many, many things. And we look at structural issues, we look at social and behavioral challenges that young people find themselves being faced with. And if I were to just tease out a few in terms of behavioral challenges, we continue to distribute condoms, which are a primary prevention in terms of the Department of Health, not just for HIV, but also for unplanned pregnancies as well as STIs. We find that the use of condom, unfortunately, seems to be decreasing, irrespective of the efforts that are coming from the Department of Health. We're looking at economic challenges where young people find themselves having to go into what we refer to as transactional relationships, where you'll find that they get into relationships for economical gain or for monetary gain, but also relationships with older people. And again, because of the gains or so-called gains that they get out of that, we also have challenges where you'll find that we tend to deal with families that are headed by a child, young people. And when there is that, then there's also, an issue where you'll find that the young person then finds themselves having to find a way to feed their younger siblings or to make ends meet. And then they find themselves in what we refer to also as high transmission areas, which are areas where you'll find that there's a lot of interchange of sex for gain, any kind of gain. So these are some of the challenges that we're having. But I believe that if we are working together, especially in terms of communication and mobilization, ensuring that young people have access and availability to these interventions, we might just win, because as the department, we are actually expanding the basket of interventions for prevention. And what we have seen is that some of the challenges, as I said, they cut across, because we try to approach prevention in combination, because there's no one size fits all. We want to make sure that young people test for HIV, for example, ensure that the testing is accessible and available in a way that is comfortable to them. We have moved beyond making testing something that is done in public health facilities. We've moved into communities. We're actually now even implementing self-screening, which is a method of self-testing. So we try that, and it is only when one knows their status that they're able to venture into or channeled into prevention interventions. So if one is HIV negative, that's when then we talk about the prevention interventions. But if one is HIV positive, we try to put them onto treatment, because we also know that if one is on treatment and they comply and they stay on treatment, we're talking to that 90 that the Deputy President was talking about, where they remain virally suppressed. And we talk about issues of undetectable viral loads, where the chances of transmission become minimal. I don't know if I should continue or if I can just pause.
Has there been a noticeable change after you, as you put it, expanded the basket?
So what we're seeing, the idea of a basket is to make sure that there are options. Options are very important. because there are interventions that may not work for one individual, but may work for the other. And I'll take us back to the numbers that we were talking about, where we mentioned the 14,000 that the Deputy President mentioned for 2019, but then we moved down to 11,000 and then down to 10,000. So that may not, maybe one may say it's not significant, but in terms of public health, one individual that we get to, or rather one infection that we get to avert goes a long way. So there is some decline, but as I was saying, it is not as steep as we would want it to be. That's why we would really like to acknowledge that we still have a long way, and we need to ensure that we continue to work together to reach that goal as we are moving towards the 2025 prevention goals and beyond to 2030, where we are now wanting to see HIV as no longer a health threat.
Ms. Shabalala, before that line gave us problems, I was asking what, from your vantage point, you believe is what brought us here.
As implementation campaign, as I was saying, that we are not shocked by these numbers of young people being infected with HIV. And we've been talking about the young people that are being infected with HIV for a very long time. And we have been working together with government and other stakeholders in working together, making sure that we decline these numbers. But the decline are very and we are not happy about it because we don't want to see more infection as the country we are the 30 not infections of HIV. If these numbers detected as much as I'm doing now, so means we do in young people and keeping young people into care, but preventative methods that are there in country need to be available for all young people so that people can infected with HIV. At this time and age, we're expecting this number of young people being infected with HIV. And what bothers us more is that these are the young children that are prevented from HIV through mother-to-child transmission, but now at later stage are infected with HIV. So that means then we need to come together and work together, especially with young people. And we need to learn from the past that people living with HIV managed to put us where we are as the country. But then we need to bring more young people to be voiced and educate each other and also support them, not take over their program, but support them so that we can, because they know more what are their problems. We believe if we engage more young people and allow young people to lead, we will reach our goals. But if we keep on interfering and give them a chance, then we'll have a problem.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Chirarikire, you know, the problem of economic challenges, is of transactional relationships, or young women in particular having relationships with older people for economic and other reasons. It's not, of course, we're seeing that even around the question of gender-based violence. And the question is whether where everyone meets, in other words, where there's you, where there's social development, and a whole host of other departments, you feel you are making progress in dealing with these socio-economic challenges?
So again, when we're looking at impact, we need to, again, refer it to the figures that we're talking about. But yes, with the social cluster, the Department of Health, social development, as well as basic education, at least, we do meet, we do have common meeting places or areas or platforms where we discuss the young people. And I'm mentioning especially basic education because that's where we find them at a very early age. And data, stats, and evidence has shown that if we keep young people, if we are able to keep young people in school, at least until matric, then they're able to get a better chance of at least trying to avert or avoid some of these issues. And this is why there was that campaign that was called She Conquers campaign that was launched in 2016, which had like the 5 objectives, and some of them were really economic empowerment, fighting gender-based violence. You mentioned that as well, keeping young people in school, trying to prevent unplanned pregnancies, as well as reduction of incidence of HIV. So as we communicate with the young people, we continue to bring in, even if it's like close to a school compound or environment, these interventions so that young people can get into that. And then we then have joined with higher institutions through Higher Health, where we have our, again, campaigns or outreach activities where we try to say that as young people move from high school into first year university, then again, we try to talk to them as they get into that space so that they're able to get now further interventions. We have pre-exposure prophylaxis, PrEP, which is also another intervention that we are working on or expanding within the department to ensure that young people are able to get into that, so that even if they're not in a space where they're able to negotiate condom use with the current partner for different reasons, then at least there is PrEP that they can use to continue to prevent HIV infection.
Ms. Shabalala, I mean, on the sort of social side, what can we still do to, really arrest this?
As Ms. Tato said, Dr. Tato said that there are interventions that are happening. I think we need to scale up these interventions. We need to use all preventative methods that are there that we can. We know now there's U is equals to U campaign, which means untransmittable equals to untouchable. That campaign has shown good results. If a person living with HIV is having sex with a person without HIV, chances of infecting that person are very, very slim. So those are the campaigns that we need to engage into communities, but also scale up the intake, especially ARV intake, and we need to keep people on treatment. People are virally suppressed, of which it will be difficult for them to infect other people. So those are the interventions that are mostly important. But also we need to manage stockouts that people cannot go without treatment, so that people don't always adhere to their treatment. So there is a lot that we can do, and continuous education, treatment literacy education is still important, because at this time and age, I think that people understand the issues of HIV. When we are on the ground, to find that there's still a lot of stigma, there's still a lot of discrimination, and mostly now we know that most people living with HIV, they have self-stigma. They are unable to disclose to their partners, which also increases the rate of HIV infection. So we need to continue having also support groups and adherence clubs, which we know that those things helped us in the early days of HIV. And if they did at that time, we believe that it can continue to help us, because people are dealing with so many issues. We are talking about gender-based violence. We are talking about mental health, that we are not talking about it. Psychosocial support that is not provided equally. We need it. We need to strengthen the services that we provide to people, so that people can be able to prevent themselves from HIV, and also the preventative methods that they need to be out there, and people need to be encouraged to take them.
Lastly, Doc, as we move towards, World AIDS Day in about 12 days, what we can expect, and what this particular year you are mobilizing the country towards?
So the World AIDS Day, as we know, it is an event that commemorates, the lives that we lost to HIV, those who are infected and affected. And this year, it will be, the national event at least, will be in Free State, in Mangaung, and that is led by the South African National AIDS Council, and it will be presided by the Deputy President as the chairperson of SANAC. And the theme for this year's World AIDS Day is actually equalize and integrate to end AIDS. And this is a theme that is actually derived from the international global AIDS strategy theme of equalize. Because again, we continue to say that, we need to ensure that there's equity and that we ensure that we leave no one behind in terms of our interventions when it comes to key and priority populations. So again, during the World AIDS Day, we bring services to the people, and this is usually to ensure that we provide an enabling environment for health-seeking behavior for communities that wouldn't otherwise have this opportunity if this event or outreach was not there. So I think I would basically just say that all the provinces will be having their own build-up activities, and towards the World AIDS Day event itself on the 1st, but the national event will be going to Free State. And as I say, we're equalizing and we're integrating, ensuring that we are bringing services to the people. We are reintegrating those who actually fell off the services, be it on the 2nd 95, which is in initiation, or on the 3rd, which is viral suppression, go back into treatment to make sure that we stay virally suppressed, as my colleague Sibongile has already said. Thank you.
Let me thank both of you for agreeing to come on this evening. PT Technology was giving us problems there, but thank you. Of course, this conversation taking place on the back of what the Deputy President, who is also the chairperson of the South African National AIDS Council, spoke about yesterday in Parliament, painting a rather gloomy picture, of the country's HIV infection rate, especially among young people and especially among young women. And as our guests were saying, among the contributing factors in this increase in new infections is behavioral change, but also, people ditching, condoms, due in part to economic challenges where people get into or enter into transactional relationships where they have to, they have relationships with older people for financial and other reasons. We really need to spread the message, use of condoms, but also to deal with the societal issues associated with this problem, because we've really been doing well over the years. We've seen deaths declining. We've seen many people having access to antiretroviral drugs that prolong people's lives, which has been good. But the spike we are seeing is really not good for all of us. So do spread the message out there and do something where you see exploitative relationships that really put women's lives in particular at risk. But we're going to leave that conversation there for tonight. And after the break, a new report shows that despite a long history of mining regulations and endless promises to rectify the situation, the extremely high number of abandoned and derelict mines is leaving many more communities destitute, and the situation is only getting worse, according to that report, which we're going to look into in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. A longer than necessary break because of load shedding. Our lines are giving us some serious problems. We're hoping that we've had to settle for telephone lines, and we hope at least they will carry us for the remainder of the program. To this now, a newly released report shows that despite a long history of mining regulation, as well as promises by the mining industry and politicians to rectify the situation, the extremely high number of abandoned and derelict mines is leaving many more communities destitute. And the situation is only getting worse. The report was released yesterday by the Lawyers for Human Rights. Jessica Lawrence is a senior attorney with the Lawyers for Human Rights, the people who undertook the study. She's on the line. Also part of the conversation is Meshach Mbangula, a member of civil society group Mining Affected Communities United in Action, Makua, in short. Good evening to both of you, and thanks very much for your time. Very interesting observations, Jessica. Take us back a little, if you will, as to why you decided to undertake this study.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. And I'm sorry I'm unable to join via video. Lawyers for Human Rights undertook to do research into the evolution of mining and its impact on communities, particularly Black working class communities, with a focus on closures. And we traced the history of South Africa's mining legacy from the colonial to the apartheid and into our 28 years of democracy. And we traveled the length and the breadth of mining communities to engage with communities on their experiences of mine closures. The reason that we chose the state and impact of mine closure was because this particular issue shed light and insight into the true nature and relationship of mining and communities. Our research allowed us to assess the true legacy of mining projects as well as the mining industry and its impact on communities and community development, but specifically through the lived realities of mining-affected communities that are impacted by operations within the extractive sector.
And this is happening despite the fact that, as your report points out, we have regulations in place.
That's correct. We have very good regulations in place. Whilst there are some loopholes which are being exploited by mining companies, we do have a very robust mining and environmental legal framework. And what our research highlighted is that we have actually had quite progressive laws in place for decades, even pre-democracy, which protected communities and placed an obligation on companies to remedy the environment post-mining.
Ms. Sheck, none of what this report has unearthed surprises you.
Exactly. We've been having even regulations, of Minerals Act to make sure that it should comply in mining closure. It's not surprising me because our communities are facing issues of environmental, social, and economic issues, and which bring about poverty to the communities and rapidly dismantle, the economy of the communities affected by mining. And we find it very difficult to understand why the government, especially the MRE, is failing really to have a political will to hold these mines, multinational companies, liable to this. And when we take it to ourselves, we end up facing serious harassment from the police and the securities in their companies, which is we don't get any recognition from the government, and we had to take serious action around it. So the whole of 8 provinces that are having mines are seriously affected by mines closure and not rehabilitation at all. And which is the non-rehabilitation obviously have heavy chemicals, uranium, which have radiation, and that itself has caused a serious problem. And these people came in and looted minerals and live without doing any, rehabilitation, which causes problems. So all the communities that are in the heavy mines are facing serious problems with this. So the report came, and it's very much good for awareness to make sure people understand what is the mining is just a formula for disaster.
I'm keen to know why you think that, or you say that it's lack of political will on the part of the Minerals Department. Why isn't it an issue of, for example, let's say, inefficiency?
Yes, they've come up with a serious regulation on NPRDA and NEMA and National Environmental Management Act, of Act 50 of 2001, which states very well that is, we should have the procedure of mine closure. But unfortunately, the mines know that the PMRE have all those laws. They are part of creating those laws. But unfortunately, because somehow there's corruption and they don't want to hold these mines liable. Or maybe over and above that, they are shareholders of these mines. So how can you hold yourself liable for not complying? That's the problem that we're facing.
I mean, Jessica, I mean, your report does say, as Mishek, has just said, that the continuation of mine abandonment is mainly due to continuing state neglect. But your report also says that it is also because of corporate impunity.
Yes, that's correct. If I could start with the first point, mining companies exploit legal loopholes in our legislation, and one of those examples is care and maintenance. What we have seen is that companies apply to be placed under care and maintenance, and this application is processed by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, and a mine can be placed under care and maintenance for a period of 5 years, following which that status will be assessed. What we are seeing is that mines are placed under care and maintenance for prolonged periods of time, which means that the mine is not operating but remains stagnant with very minimal environmental maintenance taking place. It is the Department of Mineral Resources' responsibility to ensure that mines do not continue under care and maintenance in excess of 5 years, but only in exceptional circumstances. Through our research, we have seen that in some cases, mines have been on care and maintenance for 10 to 15 years. And in one case, there is a mine that has been on care and maintenance since the late 90s. Furthermore, mines do not comply with their obligations in terms of their social and labor plans, as well as their financial obligations for rehabilitation. So what we have seen is that mines have inadequate finances in order to rehabilitate the mine area, to restore it to its pre-mining condition, and therefore opt to stay on care and maintenance, either because it is too expensive to rehabilitate the area and they will not be issued with a closure certificate, or it is that they are hoarding resources. Regardless, it is the department's responsibility to ensure that the mine that is not operating closes in compliance with the legislation. The Council of Geoscience has said that there's currently 6,100 ownerless and derelict mines. And this means that these mines are no longer being operated by the holder of the mining right, and their former owner is not involved in any maintenance of the mine or mitigation of the impacts on public safety, health, and the environment. The Department of Mineral Resources indicated that they are aware of the 6,100 abandoned mines, ownerless and derelict mines, and that due to resource constraints within the Department of Mineral Resources, they are unable to rehabilitate those mines. They said that they have started with rehabilitating those which are most at risk, and these are mostly asbestos mines. But if the department improves its regulation and ensures compliance and does not allow corporate impunity, then it will not be the responsibility of the department to rehabilitate, but rather the companies who have a duty of care towards the community and towards the environment.
Mishek, the report says that, one of the, we have this ineffective mine closures, and this becoming a defining characteristic of the industry in South Africa. One of the reasons is lack of recognition of communities as stakeholders, and where something has been done, or at least where mining companies and the government start moving, is when communities protest.
Yes, definitely. There is no. We try and force a platform where we really have a meaningful consultation around this. We are saying a free, prior, informed consent should be legislated so that it can give power to us to make sure that it's the mine. like nature.
We're losing your line there, Meshach. If I may come back to you, Jessica. Now, there is the little explored or spoken about factor as well, and that is the bribing of certain community members and traditional leaders.
Yes, that's correct. What we have seen through our research and what communities have expressed is that often mines do not meaningfully engage with the community, because as part of the application for a mining right, a company has to hold meaningful consultation with the community. But instead of actually engaging in that meaningful consultation, what the mining companies often do is they go to the traditional authority within the community and they get an undertaking from those traditional leaders who confirm or give consent to the mining on behalf of the community without the community being consulted. And what Meshach is talking about is that communities are now demanding that the right to free, prior and informed consent is included in our legislation, which will ensure that mining communities who are going to be impacted by mining have the right to choose whether they want mining or the right to say no. Communities who are going to shoulder the burdens of the impacts of mining ought to have a say in the type of development which they want.
Meshach, another sort of little explored contributor is often like tensions between migrant workers and local communities on the face of economic pressures, and how that, which at times also leads to violence and so on, that being another contributor.
Exactly. Failing to follow the procedure of mining closure. Because firstly, the mine, before it can close, it has to have a kind of a contingent plan for the workers. That is, it gives them other skills, to be marketable in other sectors. But that itself is a problem, because when it closes down, obviously the people are stuck, and the economy, the local economy, obviously rapidly dismantled. And over now, that is, people are all the smallest economy that is there. We all have to fight, to benefit from it. And now the fight starts intensifying against the migrant labor to say, you go, because now we are taking our jobs, another problem is that the crime increases, and families fails because of that economic failure and the mine failing to close in a right way. So definitely all these things, we see them in a mining area as soon as the mine closes down. But if the mine follows the right procedures, definitely sure there will be contingency plans that are put in place to make sure that communities are left behind with their own determination of development, not just depending on the mine. But this is done, like Jessica, put it straightly, so that is the mines end up selling the mines to smaller organizations or institutions that doesn't understand the mining closure or doesn't understand the mining procedures, and end up not closing the mine in the right way. And another thing that is important is the rehabilitation fund. The TMRE should make sure that is the mine put aside the rehabilitation fund, so that when they start closing, they should be able to close the mine in the right way. Mm-hmm. And the report states very well that is, from the beginning of the mine, there should be a program of how do we gonna end up closing the mine and rehabilitate the land. But that is not there. And the TMRE, as the regulator, was supposed to make sure to monitor that everything is in place, so that when the mine comes to a stage of closing, everything is followed. But that is not happening. And who suffers? It's the communities that are hosting the mine.
And of course, I mean, Jessica, there's also the problem of the proliferation of zamazamas with everything they come with, violence, thuggery, abuse of women in particular, substance abuse as well, and many other ills.
That's correct. Many of the communities have expressed their concern regarding zamazamas, but I think it's important to bring us back to the fact that mines are not closed properly creates a situation where artisanal miners come into the area. And I think it's also important to understand that we have various categories of artisanal miners. We have communities who are devastated by the impacts of the mines closing because mines are not fulfilling their obligations in terms of social and labor plans and are not adequately developing mining communities. Therefore, when a mine closes, the entire economy of that mining community shuts down with the mine, resulting in high levels of unemployment and community members becoming destitute, resulting in them only having the option but to engage in artisanal mining. We also have criminal syndicates who take the closure of mines as an opportunity to, of course, mine and then also exploit community members who, whilst they are engaging in illegal mining, are engaging in this kind of mining in order to survive. And what we are seeing is that criminal syndicates are exploiting those community members who may not have access to the markets to sell products. But I think it's really important that the Department of Mineral Resources, and they have indicated an intention to legalize small-scale mining. So if we have laws which regulate small-scale mining, this will allow communities that are impacted by mine closure to earn a living in a legal way, and it will also address the criminal syndicates who exploit the closure of mines.
Let me thank both of you for being part of making this conversation happen on the back, of course, of that newly released report, which shows that despite a long history of regulation in this country, as well as promises by both the mining industry and the politicians charged with this space to rectify the situation, there's still an extremely high number of abandoned and derelict mines in our country, leaving many more communities destitute. And according to this report released yesterday, the situation is only getting worse. That report, of course, released yesterday by the Lawyers for Human Rights. Jessica Lawrence, who just spoke now, is a senior attorney with the Lawyers for Human Rights. The people who undertook that study, also part of the conversation, was Mishek Mbangula, who is a member of the civil society group Mining Affected Communities United in Action. Apologies for the lines, they were really terrible this evening, but that's it. Thank you for watching, and that's it from the Watchdog team for tonight and for this week. Do join us again on Monday, same time. Have a good night and a great weekend.